Dr Brian Farron and his wife Robin are settling into their new digs at Bishop Court in Newcastle after travelling from Perth, where Brian was assistant bishop. The 61-year-old says the hunter has changed quite a bit since he studied theology at Morpeth in the 60s.
There are enormous changes, physical changes. I mean, I'm just amazed at how beautiful the city is, actually. And I think Newcastle had that reputation, of course, being a steel town and BHP dominating it. But when you look around and the views, they're just amazing.
Responsible for the entire Hunter region, Dr Farron says the church must work to help the needy.
Especially, I think, now in kind of government policies where there's much more scrutiny of people who are dependent on welfare, far more scrutiny of them than on anyone else. And so there seems to be a harshness in Australia at the moment. So I really think the church has to compensate for that.
Bishops from across Australia will attend tomorrow's enthronement at Christchurch Cathedral, and the new bishop believes it won't be long until women are allowed to fill the bishop's role.
If in fact that the canon had passed at the Perth Synod last year, I think seriously there would have been women candidates for this position.
Paul Lobb, NBN News. 10 years ago, health authorities were warning people not to eat fish from the lake because of high concentrations of heavy metals. Now, with the Pasminco lead smelter closed and commercial fishing ceased, the lake is again becoming a fisherman's paradise. Sightings of dolphins and sharks are more frequent, and most agree the fishing is improving.
There are particular species that are increasing. Tailor are one that is getting up in the catch rate. We've had a very successful whiting season and a number of very good bream and snapper starting to get in the lake, so that is true.
The latest survey by the Department of Primary Industries shows there are more tailor, sand whiting and flathead being caught compared to the last survey 5 years ago. With tailor, the report claims the average weight is up more than 5 times.
I sometimes wonder how they get to that statistic, because indeed if a tailor was caught a couple of years ago at a kilo weight, to be 540% larger, it means it is 5.4 kilo today, and that is not happening.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
You could have heard a pin drop in the school hall at Callaghan College's Waratah campus today. All eyes were on the tall man with the microphone at the front of the room, most well known for his efforts on the field with the Kangaroos AFL squad. But Jason McCartney told a story which made his sporting achievements seem insignificant. He told the inspiring tale of how he survived the Bali bombings in 2002.
I'm showing a worst case scenario, and you hope anyone I show this to never has to go through that situation. But there is a positive ending, and it's about looking at the steps I put in place to turn that all around.
Jason conducts his youth leadership seminars, which teach kids about choices and consequences, goal setting and support networks at schools around Australia. Waratah Technology Campus, the only Newcastle school to secure the AFL Greats services, was a fitting candidate for more than just the ordinary reasons.
As a disadvantaged school, the children have sometimes not got the role models in their lives. And having someone like Jason who can talk about his own life, real life experiences and set that role model for them.
Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
This is a climatic aspect that people from outside the region don't normally associate with the hunter. It's the Barrington Tops Plateau's subalpine zone, and by this morning, just 50 kilometres west of Gloucester, the cold weather sweeping across New South Wales had turned it into a majestic snowfield.
We've had about 3 or 4 inches right across the Barrington Tops down to about 1,000 metres.
That 10 to 15 centimetres of snow today enchanted more than 100 people, parents taking their children out of school to build a snowman, while others realised a dream to see snow for the first time.
Oh yeah, I didn't think there'd be that much snow up here actually. No, we thought we'd just get the gate and have to walk up a little bit, but there seems to be a lot up here.
Yeah, it's not like, I guess, on TV, but it's a lot colder. Yeah, no, it's beautiful.
A big crowd is expected this weekend, prompting national parks, state forests and police to jointly make an appeal for sightseers to be prepared for the conditions and to follow directions from their staff on the ground.
It's a fantastic time to enjoy some snow on Barrington Tops, but people need to make sure that they are aware and prepared for the conditions and just practice extreme caution on the roads because they become quite hazardous.
Tonight, the Gloucester Scone Road remains closed at the Honeysuckle Picnic area and below the Dingo Gate east of Scone. Just how long the Barrington Top snow cap will remain in place will all depend on weather conditions over the next few days. The best preserving conditions will come from the sky clearing, the wind dropping and frosty conditions developing overnight. Gary Blair, NBN News.
When the rain finally came, small-town businesses from Wee Waa to Merry Waa revelled in every drop. It doesn't rain dollars, of course, but it does help prise open dusty wallets.
They're not spending a lot of money because times are quite tough, because as we've got a merchandise shop here and it's quite slow at the moment.
With a population of around 2,300, Merry Waa is at the mercy of changeable farming fortunes. When farmers hurt, so does the town, and the drought has brought its fair share of pain.
Normally this time of year we'd be sowing crops and buying, selling cattle, all that sort of stuff, but it's just not happening at the moment because of the dry weather.
As on the land, the rain has buoyed confidence in the town. Merry Waa's recent Festival of the Fleeces, a celebration of a community battling drought together.
It has a horrific effect on the shops, and this is one reason we brought the festival into the town area, to try and support them. It all goes round and we depend on them, they depend on us.
It's a similar story in Australia's horse capital, Scone, although many larger towns are better positioned to weather the big dry.
Yeah, it has a great impact, obviously, but we're probably a little bit insulated here in that we're very diversified. We've got mining and horses and all the rest of it, so we're probably not as suffered as much as some of the other towns.
Here too, the business community hopes the rain will signal a retail revival.
People start to see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel and start to spend a few dollars again.
Tomorrow night, what future for farming?
There's got to be obviously more money in the land.
Who will be willing to battle future droughts?
Crowned the Australian amateur champion just 3 weeks ago, it would have been a brave punter to bet against Sarah O today. Protecting a 3-stroke lead, the Sydney teenager missed very few opportunities in the final round. Never had a tree been so handy on a golf course. With bitterly cold and strong winds, scores were bound to blow out. Second overnight, Western Australian Bree Turnbull had no joy until a birdie on the 13th, but that simply wasn't going to be enough. Newcastle's own Julie Swanson was another who'd admit the good holes were outweighed by the bad. But Nikki Garrett literally came from the clouds on the back nine. Trailing by 7 at the start of play, the Central Coast teenager finished with a birdie on the 18th to card a 2-under par 71 and apply some pressure on Sarah O. But the young defending champion was as cool as a veteran, O finishing with a 2-over par 75, securing a 3-stroke victory.
It was very windy and cold, but it was like that for everyone, so yeah, it's good to finish 2 over.
Todd Nardi, NBN News. At the halfway point of the season, the Jaegers would be relatively happy sitting in 4th spot. They've had more wins than losses. The challenge now is to beat a top 3 side. That opportunity arrives when they meet the Melbourne Phoenix on Saturday. The match means something a little extra for Jane Altswager. The competition's 3rd highest scorer was left out of the Australian squad this week and knows she now needs to perform against the game's best.
I need to make sure when we do line up against, say, the Swifts and the Thunderbirds again, and again this weekend against Phoenix, that I'm on top of my game and make sure that I have a really top game against those teams.
Jaegers lost by 6 to the Phoenix 4 weeks ago, and this time may have to find a replacement for experienced defender Ali Tucker, who's in doubt due to family commitments.
She holds up that defence end extremely well, and probably the mastermind behind a lot of our defensive plays.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
A Boy Called Billy, a storybook hero just for kids.
The horses were saddled and the boys set out towards the upper end of the paddock, they called the clump.
Author Ernie Johnson drew on his own life stories to create The Adventures of Billy Green.
I wrote a story about my wife and I and our lives together and when we were little and growing up, and then the other stories just happened to eventuate out of that.
They're also part of a professional passion to help kids, especially boys, catch the reading bug.
Because boys really find it very difficult to read a story. They'll read 8 or 10 pages and stop. And that's why this book is a group of short stories all about the one character, Billy Green.
Launched by Knights coach Michael Hagan at Dudley Primary, the book has already become part of that school's curriculum. Ernie's son Colin, a teacher, has created a workbook for his students.
Because they're very Aussie type stories as well, I know lots of the kids in my classroom will absolutely love them.
And they won't have to wait long for more stories. Ernie's already penning Volume 2.
And I suppose it'll be the new adventures of Billy Green. Yeah.
When the southerly wind blew its way up the coast to Newcastle at 5 a.m, gusts of up to 90 kilometres an hour ripped through the anchorage, causing about half of the 21 ships waiting off the port to weigh anchor and head further out to sea. For several of those that remained, the strong wind caused their anchors to drag along the bottom, and in a crowded anchorage, that can lead to collisions.
We believe that they have actually contacted each other. Those two ships have now moved out of the anchorage and they've cleared the area and they've gone out way off the coast.
Swells of up to 9 metres were recorded off Nobbies, leaving the port entrance impassable for most ships and keeping harbour controllers busy watching their radar screens.
We can monitor the anchorage very accurately, and we were in a position this morning to warn ships of the fact that the swell was coming up, the weather was deteriorating, and then when ships started to drag their anchors, we picked that up very quickly and were able to broadcast to the anchorage that they were moving.
Beachside walkers needed protection to avoid a facial sandblasting treatment, while a ride out on the breakwall was reserved only for the brave.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Lots of windy, makes you kind of feel alive.
Meantime, there's now about 15 centimetres of snow across the Barrington Tops. The National Parks and Wildlife Service says roads in the tops remain closed and people should check with the Scone or Gloucester Tourist Information Centres for the latest information. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
This week's declaration by Keith Stronach that land along the Newcastle rail corridor is unsuitable for development marks a major turning point in the debate over the future of the line. He believes the tracks should be retained and used by trams or light rail for public transport, a call welcomed by the Lord Mayor.
He's supporting what I've said and what's been said by the Low Hunter Transport Working Group, keep the corridor. And it's good to hear a developer saying it's not the sort of land you can build on.
Ironically, the Stronach position comes almost 5 years to the day that the Lord Mayor was championing the return of trams to the city.
I haven't given up on that. I've been waiting for the government to make a decision, and the decision's been announced, and that stays in place as I understand it. So the idea of getting trams working through the corridor is something that is still very much a strong option for me.
And the Lord Mayor believes the heavy rail alternatives may be the only way the city can overcome increasing delays being experienced by motorists at the Stewart Avenue railway gates.
And as we see Lee Wharf developments extend further westerly, it's very clear that you either need another level crossing for motor vehicles, you need improved pedestrian crossing, and how on earth can you get that with the heavy rail operating?
Gary Blair, NBN News.
It's been the place of many battles. Now Ferris Oval is the subject of one. Last night, some locals vented their anger over plans to sell the ground to developers, which could make way for the expansion of Charlestown Square.
Probably appeared to them to be an easy target to go to a council and only deal with one owner, and nice because it's open, you don't have to pull anything down or change it.
Although the Oval is in a poor state, the loss of open space is among the concerns of the Charlestown Precinct Committee and, along with Councillor Buck, will take their opinions to Monday night's council meeting. Further south, there's another development debate where locals are vowing to dig their heels in. The Catherine Hill Bay Progress Association will hold a public meeting tonight, launching its plan of attack out to stop a large-scale development from being approved.
It's city scale imposed on a heritage village of miners' cottages.
A Sydney-based company is seeking approval to build a tourist and residential complex on land in Catherine Hill Bay, the border of Lake Macquarie and Wyong.
And if it goes, if it's overridden to suit a developer's whim, then, it means that there's nothing on the coast sacred.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
It's an indelible farming image. Father and son are top trusty horses, flanked by faithful dogs. Ian and Kevin Hopkins are a true team in testing times. From Wagga in central western New South Wales, they've been on the road since this drought began, years now, ending up in Boggabri in the continual search for feed for their cattle.
They've done extremely well because they've been on the road for 2.5 years because we haven't had a route to get home, so we've been just on the route all the time, just walking around the route.
They were just about out of options when the rain came.
It was like gale falling out of the sky.
And now, finally, they may be able to head home.
We'll give it a few more weeks, then we'll, the way things are looking, that we should be able to go home this year.
One thing's for sure, this is no easy life, and the days of the family farming tradition, it's feared, could be numbered. After so many years of tough times, grazier Mike Moses says he can't see his 2 children taking over the business.
Now the children are not coming home to the bush. They say, why would you come home to this? Dad, I can make, $700, $800 a week living in Sydney and enjoying the girls and the good life.
It's very difficult for the next generation to buy out everybody else and re-establish themselves. So there's a whole changeover sort of sitting there ready to occur.
But a lot of them have left, gone to the mines, gone for further education, and you're quite right. I mean, the average age of people in these laneways today is probably closer to 60 than 50, and I think that represents a huge problem.
So what's the solution?
There's got to be obviously more money in the land.
Or maybe you just have to be prepared to wait. Most of Tony Whitehead's mates have left their properties and now work for wages in the mines or the power stations, but he's far from envious.
They laugh at me because of they get the weekends off and all that, but I say to them, well, look at it from my perspective. In 10 or 15 years when I sell my farm, I'll be a millionaire and you'll be working for wages. See you later.
You've just got to love that farmer's optimism.
It's round 16 and there's some great clashes starting tonight when the Roosters take on the Eels, who have won 6 straight on the back of Wonder Boy halfback Tim Smith and a host of others. Now, since the 2001 Grand Final loss for Parramatta, their form has been mediocre at best, but this latest streak of victories, honestly, is the real thing. Now, the Roosters, well, they're just hanging in there in 8th position on 16 points. And there's no doubt the time it's taken to adjust to life without Freddie Fittler is a lot longer than anyone anticipated. They need to win tonight. The Raiders are also on 16 points, but more of a danger the Bulldogs, who are just 1 point behind them and looming to jump back into the top 8 very soon with their key players coming back. Now, Ricky Stewart is a tenacious coach and will be ready for them, but for mine, it's the Eels to keep up the role. Now, as I mentioned before, the Bulldogs are coming into form, and they're also in an exciting clash on Sunday when they take on Manly at Brookvale Oval. Now, the Bulldogs had a solid win against the Raiders last week, but it was the return of Mark O'Mealy that was most impressive. You wouldn't have thought he'd missed a week. Super dedicated and super fit. He'll play an important role on the weekend, as will Manly's Ben Kennedy, who's also in rare form. On to my tips now for round 16, and I said before the Eels tonight to continue their role. Saturday, there's 3 games. I'm going for the Raiders, Storm and the Knights. And on Sunday, Broncos, Dragons and the Seagulls to win their games. Good luck with your tips. I'll see you all next week.
It all looked business as usual at their last session this morning. The captain and coach hatching a plan to catch out the Panthers tomorrow night. But the pair have also worked hard to make sure the team remains focused after the news this week that several won't be a part of the side past this season.
We can't have people, worried about other aspects. We've got to get everyone in tight, and there's been no grovelling at training, which is a good sign. So I think you'll see a unit this weekend. There'll be no problems.
While there is talk of John's and Origin captaincy, there's an obvious push for Bulldogs prop Mark O'Mealy to make the Blues side for Origin 3. Steve Simpson started in the front row for the Blues in the series leveller and will play there tomorrow night against the Panthers, but he's not looking past that game.
I suppose I just want to play well, just concentrate on my own game and hopefully get forward for us and tighten up the middle of the ruck there. So if we can do that, hopefully that'll be enough to get selected in Game 3.
There are no late changes expected before kick-off, despite Kurt Gidley travelling with the team, the 5'8" simply heading south to get further treatment on his injured leg. Jim Callanan, NBN News. With Kavossi Franklin already advising the Pirates he's to stay in Europe, Brian Weathers confirmed today the news that most saw coming. Showing promise at trials with the LA Lakers in America, it seems Weathers will ply his trade in Europe this year. But either way, Australia isn't in his plans.
We've been in the process for the last couple of months of making sure that we had other options, and we're hoping that next week we'll be able to make a couple of big announcements for their replacements.
They'll have big shoes to fill, given the contribution Franklin and League MVP Weathers had last season. Already the short list of possibles is down to 4 or 5.
I'm very confident that they'll be as good. Their agents keep telling me they're better, so that remains to be seen.
After almost 50 years of racing, Maitland Harness Club will host its last meeting on Sunday. Still fighting for survival as a race venue, the last event is scheduled at 4:25 Sunday afternoon. In Newcastle Rugby League, all games to round 15 are on Sunday, with Raymond Terrace sure to get a test of their premiership credentials against Western Suburbs. It's 1 versus 2 in Newcastle and Hunter Rugby tomorrow, with the Waratahs to host the High-Flying Greens. While in the NBN Soccer League, it's a grand final replay at Broadmeadow on Sunday, with the Magic hosting a Western side still rebuilding from last year's disappointment. Packing an impressive fight resume, Rob Calloway looked every bit the All-American boy. Bob Mirovic had just returned from the US, where he'd been sparring with Mike Tyson in preparation for the biggest bout of his career. Fighting for a belt once worn by Joe Bugner, points were shared on the pre-bout stare-down. Callaway, though, quick to score them once the punches started flowing. Giving up some 25 kilograms to Mirovic, the lighter fighter had all the early moves as he chipped away at some tall timber. The shots kept coming between the rounds. Mirovic's hands then did the talking as he began winding up. No wonder Callaway couldn't see them coming with a closed right eye that threatened to end the fight early. But the 120 kg frame of Mirovic was hard to miss. Right till the end they kept throwing them, and after 12 rounds both just seemed glad it was over. Sporting a head that looked like a beaten favourite, Callaway was ruled a unanimous points winner. The world title belt, the best cure for any headache.
Just a day after being born, baby Xander was again back in his father's arms. At around 8 yesterday morning, Caroline went into labour. With husband Michael and son Matthew, the trio made their way to hospital.
My wife said, "Stop the car." So I stopped the car on the side of the road and raced down the other side, opened the door, and about a minute after that, I could see the head.
Guided by ambulance officers on the phone, 10-year-old Matthew relayed information and Michael played midwife.
I cut the cord on the side of the road and into the back of the ambulance we went and off to the hospital.
The John Hunter just 4 kilometres away.
Everything was fine, yeah. I was still in a state of shock for quite a while afterwards, I think.
Officially, Xander's place of birth is listed as born before arriving at hospital. Unofficially, it's the northbound on-ramp to the Newcastle inner-city bypass at Hillsborough. Try putting that on the birth certificate.
It was scary. Mum was yelling and...
Baby Xander was making noises of his own today. The boy who really made this section of road his own. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
It cuts an imposing figure on the Newcastle skyline, and last night Christchurch Cathedral never looked better. Inside, the angelic voices of singers echoed in a packed room, with other Anglican and Catholic leaders joining the processions. Having trained in the Hunter Valley, Dr. Brian Farron has returned, this time to accept the staff, a symbol of pastoral care and authority. Then came the recognition, where the bishop was presented to the people before beginning his new role as Bishop of Newcastle.
With bags packed, it's a trip the Hunter Jaegers have been looking forward to since they were well and truly humbled by Sydney in Game 3.
We want to turn that around. We've taken what we can from that game and it's not going to bother us anymore.
Heading south as rank outsiders, the Jaegers know all too well what their Sydney cousins are capable of, and it appears the feeling is mutual.
They've always had to play their best to beat us, and that shows that they respect our team, where when they've played some of the other lower ranked teams in the competition, they've run their bench players.
Liz Ellis is a marked woman, shining for Sydney in almost every outing. The Jaegers forced to shut down not one player, but an entire team.
It is 6 out of their 7 players who are Australian players, so as much as you just target Liz, you have to look all over the whole court, and they've got players everywhere.
Players part of a team which is unbeaten. Sydney leading the league by 2 points, and an upset tomorrow night is certainly an exciting prospect and not out of the question.
It would be an awesome confidence boost, but we know that they're a fantastic unit. They've played together for so long.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
You may be familiar with his colourful stories, but today tales from popular children's author and illustrator Dr. Zeus came to life on the stage at Young People's Theatre in Hamilton. Zeusical features 70 actors in 2 casts, and this morning the backstage crew was enjoying its latest toy, a fly tower which enables swift scene and lighting changes. The creative juices are also flowing in Newcastle, with competitors in this year's Shootout Film Festival learning some filming techniques ahead of tomorrow night's 24 Hours of Madness. That's right, around 2,000 filmmakers from across the country will have just 24 hours to create a 7-minute masterpiece that could just be their launching pad to stardom. Colleen West, NBN News. Just last month, the New South Wales government announced measures to crack down on speeding trucks, introducing stiff penalties for transport companies who allow their heavy vehicles to travel at excessive speeds because of faulty speed limiters. Today, there were claims the measures don't go far enough.
I don't think you can ever be happy because there is always more to be done.
Around 150 people die each year in New South Wales in crashes involving trucks, and with 80% of all road freight movement in Australia now passing through New South Wales, the Road Transport Association says there needs to be a sense of urgency when it comes to implementing safety strategies like those discussed at a heavy vehicle summit today in Newcastle.
We need funding, we need dual carriageways, we need roads that enable all road users and vehicles of all types to be able to share the road safely.
Mr Ipers says that will become crucial over the next 15 years, with road freight expected to double. Meanwhile, a commitment from the New South Wales Minister for Roads, Michael Costa, to lobby the federal government to ensure fuel excise is channelled where it's needed most.
I've certainly proposed today that we work together to get the growth factor in the fuel excise spent directly on roads.
Colleen West, NBN News.
Having piloted New South Wales to the series win, Andrew Johns returned to Newcastle, making no promise to be on board for the Blues next year.
I don't know, mate. It's a long way away. It's a massive toll on you, probably more mentally than physically, or both physically and mentally. So maybe next year I'll see how I'm going, and if I want to do it, maybe.
Queensland vowed to target Johns last night, but could only do it in patches. Knights fans and the Queensland coach would have feared the worst when Johns clutched his knee. Clearly, it was the latter.
Oh, we just needed to blow, mate, so I went down and grabbed the knee, and it's always a good excuse.
Johns says he'll back up to play the Cowboys on Sunday. Knights teammate Denny Badiris is confident his injured toe will pass a fitness test. He goes down as captain of only the second New South Wales team to win an Origin series after losing Game 1.
I always said at the start of the camp in Game 3 that we all wanted to take our little piece of history.
For Steve Simpson, today's limp was the legacy of a tireless effort. He led the way as New South Wales defended 5 consecutive sets of 6 in the opening exchanges. In the process, Simpson suffered a bad cork to his thigh and is unlikely to play North Queensland.
Yeah, it's pretty swollen, pretty sore, so I'll go and see the physio and see what he can do with it. Hopefully he can work a miracle and get me back for Sunday.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
This is what it looks like when a cremation is underway at St Patrick's of Nulkaba. No thick clouds of black smoke, but those who live nearby fear the emissions may be harmful.
We know, and it's admitted, that there's mercury and dioxin and very small particles that can't be seen coming out of the crematorium.
It affects us because we have to check which way the wind's blowing, because we've had odours in our home. It's just something that when you're at home you don't want to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Last night, Cessnock City Council refused an application by the crematorium to increase its capacity from 400 bodies a year to 800.
There's no argument that the crematorium has been approved approximately 4 years ago and can continue to operate and cremate 400 bodies a year. The real question last night is, was it appropriate to increase that by 100% to 800 bodies? And people felt that it wasn't.
Part owner of the business, Janelle Smythe, wouldn't speak on camera today, but denied the state-of-the-art facility was polluting the neighbourhood. She says they should be able to expand like any other successful business. The matter will now be decided in the Land and Environment Court. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Less than 24 hours after allegedly driving a car involved in a fatal hit and run, Stephen Charles Zureb was granted conditional bail after a brief court appearance in Newcastle this morning. The 26-year-old was arrested last night at his Shortland home and charged with negligent driving causing death and driving with a suspended licence. In facts tendered to the Newcastle local court, police allege Zureb, who hadn't told his employer his licence was suspended, was on his way to the East Maitland Golf Club for work reasons when he became distracted. Following an extensive hunt for the vehicle, forensic testing revealed the Toyota Hilux ute he was allegedly driving struck the 39-year-old mother of two opposite a corner shop on Raymond Terrace Road. Police allege Zureb slowed down after the collision, looked in the rearview mirror and saw the woman lying in the gutter. Making no attempt to help her, it's then alleged he continued to the golf club, lied to an employee there about the damage to the car, then drove back to the East Maitland Bowling Club where he lied to his employer. Part of Zureb's bail conditions will see him report to the Newcastle Police Station twice a week. The matter has been adjourned until September to allow a thorough investigation. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
It's a project of epic proportions. Downer EDI Engineering and Custom Transportable Buildings have combined forces to complete a $28 million contract. In fact, it's the largest project of its kind ever carried out in Australia. The task to build 11 electrical switch rooms, standing more than 12 metres high and 70 metres in length, and completely fit them out, ready for the Alcan Gove alumina refinery expansion in the Northern Territory.
For these process plants, such as the Alcan expansion, they contain all the high voltage and medium voltage electrical switchgear to run the motors in the plant.
The remoteness of Gove requires equipment to be brought in by boat, so the construction site at Kooragang Island proved ideal, with the switch rooms built right next to the Hunter River and lifted onto a barge, cutting out any transportation by road.
If they were built traditionally at the fabrication facilities that can take these sort of things, they would have to be broken down into something like 20 modules to get them on the road, not 3 as we've built them here.
The 6 shipments will be complete by March next year, the total project creating more than 150 local jobs over that time.
For many cancer patients, radiotherapy is a key weapon in the fight for their lives.
Radiotherapy is used in 50% of cancer patients. So what we're doing is running trials involving radiotherapy.
Researchers at the Mater Hospital are using the technology in a wide range of trials to find ways of preventing, treating and hopefully curing cancer. A grant from the National Health and Medical Research Council of nearly $1.4 million will boost the effort.
What this money is going to be able to do is help us at long last to solidify the coordination of the trials here in Newcastle.
A further $1.84 million in grant money will be used at the Mater for other cancer trials. Meanwhile, another grant from the council will help unlock one of the most puzzling of medical mysteries: why some babies are born early. The Mothers and Babies Research Centre at John Hunter Hospital will use $380,000 to develop a computer program to help predict whether a woman will deliver prematurely.
It can often be a bit of a conundrum for those building a new home. Even the Three Little Pigs struggled with which materials were best, unfortunately leading to some disastrous results. Coincidentally, 3 little test homes have been built on the University of Newcastle campus, funded by the Clay Brick and Paver Institute. Professor Adrian Page is undertaking the groundbreaking research into building materials and energy-efficient housing.
In the current climate of reducing energy consumption and all the implications that go with that, this is a very important study.
The first little house is cavity brick, the second brick veneer, and the third includes a large window which faces north. It even has an electronic invention which automatically draws the curtains across at 6 p.m. to recreate real-life conditions. Each one is hooked up with heat sensors and other monitors.
There's about 100 data points in each building which monitors temperature variations, heat flux and all the other things that go with monitoring energy. And we read those every 10 minutes, 24 hours a day.
And with a new energy efficiency rating scheme for new homes, the study will help long-term energy sustainability.
This will be a very valuable tool for the use of architects and other building designers to actually make sure they're getting the best energy performance in their structures.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It didn't take long to spot the difference at this soccer match. Among the men are women players. The Hunters' 3 senior Australian reps, along with a young Matilda in goal, and they looked right at home. A striker in the senior side, Katie Gill, along with her Australian captain Cheryl Salisbury and vice-captain Joanne Peters, have been keeping sharp, playing alongside the New South Wales Institute of Sport regional squad.
The guys aren't holding back, which is great and which is what we need, and they've been really respectful and actually just generous in wanting to play us in the first place.
Last night they played a mixed senior squad from Adamstown, but tomorrow they rejoin their Matilda teammates for a tour of Asia. First up is the might of China, followed by Japan and South Korea, as Australia fights for respect in their new World Cup qualifying region.
At the moment we've kind of set ourselves standards which we have to stick to, so if we don't reach them, I guess it's not really a disappointment, but it's just not reaching our full potential.
In NBN Soccer League action this weekend, Western play tomorrow while Broadmeadow welcome back skipper Ryan Smith on Sunday. One game tonight and another tomorrow in Newcastle Rugby League, while Lakes head to the west side of the lake to meet Macquarie on Sunday. And fourth-placed University will be looking to close the gap on Merewether tomorrow in Newcastle and Hunter Rugby, with the Greens placed just above the students on the ladder.
Australian cycling is getting more and more professional, and it's modelling itself off how the whole sport is modelled in Europe.
It had been a pleasant night out, two mates catching up on old times. But as the pair walked home along Hanbury Street about 10:30, they were hassled by a group of around a dozen men. A fight broke out, and as the Malay continued down the street towards the ex-services club, one of the gang lashed out with a sharp object using deadly force.
At some stage, he swung at one of the males and actually struck him in the neck, near the throat. That male has then run off. And the man that was hit in the neck virtually collapsed immediately onto the ground.
The 20-year-old was rushed to hospital but died from his injuries. He worked as an avionics technician at the Williamtown RAAF base. Hanbury Street was closed for most of the day while detectives canvassed the area. They spoke with residents while forensic police gathered every scrap of evidence. This afternoon, an apparent breakthrough, a 16-year-old being arrested in relation to the attack.
This is a situation where we've got two young blokes, but unfortunately they were overpowered by a larger group of males, and it just shows how important it is to plan your night and to plan a safe method of getting home as well.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Originally from Newcastle, 26-year-old Stuart Clout is now a lawyer in the heart of London. He heard the bus explode outside his office shortly after arriving at work. For parents Lindsay and Anne, it was business as usual today at their nursery after hearing from Stuart last night, just before the news hit in Australia.
He was talking about a bus had exploded and the top had been blown out of the bus, and without any news footage we weren't really sure what had happened. And then after the phone call we then sat down and watched the news, and the whole impact came home.
Friend Dave Smith, who's been in contact via email, says Stuart uses the tube every day.
Decided to go to work a little bit early that morning, which was very fortunate, and he'd actually passed through one of the very stations that had been bombed.
And while many are finding the news difficult to come to terms with, spare a thought for 19-year-old backpacker Mike Taylor. He's a Londoner on holiday in Newcastle.
Initially I was a little bit worried because I wasn't sure. I have some family and some friends who are working up there, and so I wasn't sure, they might have been involved, but yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone's okay.
Mike says his main concern is for his mother.
My mum is a nurse, and she's just outside London, so I was thinking, I'd heard that she'd been put on call, and heard that a few casualties had been brought into her ward and everything.
Newcastle was playing host to a visiting New Zealand warship today, but if shipyard owner Steve Forjax has his way, the city will be busy building components for warships for the next decade. Forjax and ADI have teamed up to bid for a $2 billion contract to build two new ships for the Royal Australian Navy, which will replace the current transport vessels Canimbla and Manoora. But while not willing to speak publicly today, members of the consortium have told NBN News that they're worried the government will spend its money offshore. They've contacted federal member for Patterson Bob Baldwin, who says he's ready to go into bat for the local bid.
I'll be taking a delegation of Forjax and ADI to Canberra to meet with the Minister to put forward our best case. What I'm hoping for is that we convince the government to build those in Australia, but then we need ADI and Forjax to be competitive with Western Australia, South Australia and Victoria to get the work here in the Hunter.
Forjax admits it can't compete with cheap overseas labour, but hopes the government will choose an Australian shipbuilding industry over cheaper imports. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
New South Wales victory in Origin 3 brought the conclusion to yet another series and a glimpse of some of the highlights that I thought for 2005. Now, Game 1, a bruising display by Queensland forward pack led by Carl Webb. New South Wales coming back from virtually having no ball in the first half and that 19-0 deficit, and Matt Bowen's try that made Brett Kimmorley's series unduly shortened. Now in Game 2, without a doubt, it belonged wholly and solely to Andrew Johns, the return of the King. He etched his name in Origin history. Matt King also produced some magic, and also Matt Bowen scored another late try for Queensland that made them look very dangerous for Game 3. Now in Game 3, defence was the word. 5 sets in a row for New South Wales. Anthony Minichiello's break was outstanding. Matt King's 3-try bonanza was one to remember, and as was Queensland's Danny Nutley debut. Finally, it was the end of an era for Queensland, with long-serving manager Chris Choppy Close standing down after 12 years in the Maroon camp. And the nice host, a Cowboys team with plenty backing up from Origin 3. Newcastle hopeful that Andrew Johns and Danny Medeiros will be right to play, but Steve Simpson will be out. Good news, Josh Perry will return after 6-week suspension. He's right in the middle of contract negotiations, and I'm expecting a huge display from him. He's carried a lot of angst and criticism over suspension and form in recent weeks. He's fit, he's hungry, and he's ready to go. On to round 18 tonight. I'm going for the Inform Eels tomorrow. I like the Sharks and Sea Eagles and Storm. And on Sunday, it's the Bulldogs, Roosters. Come on the Knights. Let's go. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.
Dr. Neil Carroll says surfing's his passion, so much so he helps coordinate an academic program in the water sport with a scientific twist.
But we use surfing as the model to teach those physical sciences, physics, chemistry, material science, exercise physiology and biomechanics.
It's the only surfing degree offered in the country and one of 2 in the world. In Newcastle, to give a series of talks to medical types at asthma conferences, Dr. Carroll revealed men aged over 45 who surf are much healthier than those who play contact sports.
We found that in the surfing cohort, their levels of aerobic and anaerobic fitness were almost twice that of the sedentary people and the people playing Masters rules football.
76-year-old Barry McGuigan is living proof. The Central Coast-based longboarder has enjoyed the world's best breaks for over 6 decades and continues to do so. He runs a local charity comp every year. He even does yoga.
Older men still surfing, continuing to surf at least 3 times a week, had lower risk factors for diseases that cause high amount of morbidity and mortality, particularly cardiovascular disease.
And no, this Dr. Carroll isn't related to the former world champion Tom, who also shares a love of surfing. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Adelaide United drew around 7,000 fans to Hindmarsh Stadium, and every one of them were on their feet after just a few minutes. Liam Reddy keeping out Carl Viat, but not Ross Aloisi, who finished off. The referee's assistant, though, denied him the goal, and didn't he know all about it? Skipper Ned Zelic was strong at the back in defence, while chances were rare at the other end. In the second half, more blow-ups. Newcastle's Alan Picken in the thick of things, but Zelic made sure he didn't stand alone. After Adelaide saw red, Picken got yellow. Nick Carl was sparking things for the visitors, and after some good work it opened up for Matthew Thompson, who promptly buried it in the net. Again, however, it was called back for offside. From a corner, Adelaide managed to get one that counted. Newcastle had a big finish too. Carl again involved before Bates laid off for Richard Johnson's rocket shot. 1-1, Newcastle's second draw in as many weeks. It was a deal that almost snuck under the radar. Only those closest to Andrew Johns had any idea until today.
Yeah, it got to a stage where they were taking numbers for the Triple A at the end of the year and I had to tell them I wasn't going.
But he will stay with them as a teammate for the next 3 seasons after extending his current deal by a further 2 years. It ties him to the club until the end of 2008.
It gives Andrew the opportunity to go and do something he's been obviously wanting to do and gives the club the opportunity for him to stay at our football club for the next couple of years, which is great news for everybody.
A major part of the deal with Newcastle is to allow Johns to fulfil a dream of playing rugby league in England, possibly at the end of the current NRL season for around 6 weeks. And it's understood talks are well advanced for him to join Warrington.
I grew up watching Peter Sterling and Brett Kenny go over there and play in the Challenge Cup finals and yeah, that was big news back here and it's something I've always wanted to do. I wanted to play over there and play in the big games.
It comes with a catch, however. Retire from representative football. Should he be picked, the coming Tri-Series and following State of Origin will be his last.
You know, the Knights have been very lenient and let me go. So I think I've got to pay him back with some loyalty and be a bit fair and give him about a few decisions.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The King Street Hotel in Newcastle, Club G on Maitland Road at Islington and the Kent in Hamilton. 3 popular Novocastrian pubs tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket after being forced by police to shut up shop for the busy weekend period. The closure orders relate to alleged drug activities being carried out by patrons. However, no hotel staff or licensees have been implicated. Those in the industry say the revelations came as a surprise.
I've only spoken to one of the licensees and he's quite distressed about it, had no knowledge of it at all, nor that activity.
Bruce Woods of the Australian Hotels Association believes the closure measures are extreme.
They employ a lot of people. There was a lot of students that are putting themselves through university that will be devastated with the work that they've lost over the next 3 days.
Under the Liquor Act, the police can seek to increase the closure orders to 6 months. However, such a measure is deemed unlikely. This stretch of Woodbury Road is in the process of being upgraded. Road signs warn of the dangers of loose gravel. Police believe the poor surface combined with excessive speed is what caused this tragic crash. Approaching the bridge from the south, police say it appears the 18-year-old male P-plate driver somehow spun the car 180 degrees before flipping it over the side of the bridge, jamming it against a tree. The impact was so great it sent temporary road barriers flying across the creek. The 18-year-old female in the front passenger seat was airlifted to the John Hunter Hospital in a critical condition but died soon after. The driver from Raymond Terrace is in a stable condition. This is the 4th death on Lower Hunter roads in the past 15 days, leaving police wondering what it's going to take for the message to get through.
The message that we've been trying to get out is that you have to take care and be aware of your environment at all times. This location, you can see that the road's under repair and you've got to take those conditions into account when you're driving and adjust your driving accordingly.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
A lot has been said about the Jet squad, but it's on the park, not the papers, where it counts according to the coach. And Richard Money hasn't spared anyone this week with a few home truths.
You know, we've got some players with big reputations. Reputations count for nothing in my book, to be honest. It's those reputations are earned.
he's got plenty of respect for the Mariners, whose form has firmed them as a real premiership threat. They beat Newcastle in the World Club Championship qualifiers and won the pre-season tournament.
They've got a team together that's been pretty settled and stable, which is always a big bonus for any coach. And Laurie's got them playing in a way that suits the group.
It's not a luxury Money's been able to afford. He's had to deal with injury and now illness. Several players have been laid low this week with a bout of the flu, including Socceroo Jade North. But like all, he's desperate to play against this team.
It's going to be a good derby as well. You know, we need all our support down there, and I'm sure we will. And, you know, we need to get one back on them.
Given it's only round 2, it's hardly panic stations, but Newcastle want nothing less than the full competition points.
The season's a bit of a sprint, 21 games, you know, and we can't keep on sort of saying, well, it will come right, you know what I mean? It's got to come right pretty quickly.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
With its bright yellow Duco and bold blue graphics, Jelly Bean One is not your ordinary police car, but that's what makes it so important.
The police were having a bit of trouble when the preventative officers were going out in operational vehicles, and then they'd get called back because they needed the car back for a job.
Cars are always at a premium, especially at Charlestown. Our detectives work out of there.
So the Lake Macquarie Command Superintendent approached Charlestown Square management with the dilemma. Today, thanks to a collection of community businesses, police were handed the keys to a new Hyundai Accent. It'll be used by crime prevention and youth liaison officers. The initiative comes just a week after a group of businesses bought a security vehicle which will be used to patrol Swansea. Meanwhile, following the presentation at Charlestown, Minister for Transport and the Hunter, Michael Costa, rolled up his sleeves and let off some steam behind a coffee machine. The Pollies for Small Business program is designed to give politicians a taste of the difficulties faced by small business owners. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.